Okay, first of all, we wanted to start with a land acknowledgement. We are on Nipmuc land. It's important to think about the historical components of a land acknowledgement and the indigenous peoples that have been displaced. But it's also important to think about the current situation with indigenous people and how we're relating to that. So there's a link here if you haven't checked it out. If you're stewarding land somewhere and want to see the different tribes that are active in your area, have been historically or currently organized in your area, that's a good link. And think about what actions you can take today, right? Connecting with indigenous folks in your area, being part of land back movements, or bringing visibility to missing and murdered indigenous women, and lots of other ways to connect. So that's how we wanted to start out today. And we're also, it's important to center racial equity in every component. This workshop will also address that, and in this conference. So we want to recognize the systemic oppression that has affected the food system, that continues to affect the food system, and highlight a lot of the great groups in this region that are doing work on racial justice. So here's just a one starting list that you can find in your conference materials. And just to lift up that there are caucuses happening at 1 o'clock. Black Indigenous People of Color caucus and a White Ally caucus. Thank you to our partner level sponsors and the supporter level sponsors. And don't forget to check out the great auction that's happening. There's the link, there's the QR code, you can get it and check out the auction and bid on lots of great things from NOFA members and beyond. My name is Matt Feinstein. I am a co-director of Global Village Farms in Grafton and the co-op clinic project manager of the U.S. Federation of Worker Co-ops. And today we're talking about co-ops and farms and all the support that co-ops need in getting started or transitioning a farm to a cooperative. We'll be starting with the story of a co-op that started in Western Mass, Riquezas del Campo. And then Thidi Tshiguvho will be sharing the perspective of Worcester Roots project and some international components. And then we'll be sharing resources, and it's really meant today to be a discussion. How can we move the resource, the support network forward, for farms that are interested in cooperatives, for supporters of farms that are interested in sharing the model, things like that. So let me check if Jose is here yet. Jose is here, great. To make him host.
Hola, hola, buenas tardes.
Hola, Jose. ¿Se ve bien? So Jose is a member of Riquezas del Campo in Hatfield, Massachusetts. And we would love for Jose to share their story. And then we'll have plenty of time for questions and discussion about that situation and beyond. But before we get into it, I want to do one quick question. Who here is part of a co-op farm or a farm that is starting already in the process of becoming a cooperative? And Jose. Great. And who here is part of a farm that is just interested in exploring the idea, or a land-based project or a food-based project, exploring the idea of farms, of co-ops? Great. And who here is part of a support organization that helps people with business plans or farm access or things like that? Any support organization people here? Great, some double hats too, of course. Great. So we are going to be focusing on worker cooperatives, where all the members are the individual member owners, workers of the business. There are multiple other kinds of co-ops that we can bring into the room if needed, but just to give that. So, Jose, let's make sure we can hear you fine, and go ahead and tell us your story, please.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jose Martinez. And as our colleague Matt was just telling us, I am a member as worker owner of a co-op located in Western Massachusetts, specifically in a town named Hatfield. And Riquezas del Campo, that began as a result of the need on behalf of all of the members, especially field workers or people involved in agriculture, from an organization named Pioneer Valley Workers Center. We saw a need of having access to our own land to sow our own vegetables, our own products, the same way that we had in our own countries of origin. So that began in 2018. That was when we started working with a small group of members from the center who got together to start working on creating Riquezas del Campo, which is a cooperative farm which belongs to workers and led by immigrants. So, Riquezas del Campo officially, starting on May 1st in 2019, enabled access to 9.5 acres of fertile land, land that is property of a land trust called Kestrel Land Trust within a township called Northampton. And there we were able to establish the location where we plant our crops. So both the Worker Center has the original license for long-term land ownership. This was granted to us, the members, like it would be to any other farmer who wanted to collaborate in a project like this. So, as I mentioned, with Riquezas del Campo, this is a cooperative farm, which is independent and led by immigrants. Riquezas del Campo ends up having the goal of becoming a completely independent cooperative farm, but closely linked to the Pioneer Valley Workers Center, which is a sister organization. So both organizations share the same vision of creating a community space where immigrants and workers who have low earnings, low wage workers can build together, working the land, sharing the abundance. A fundamental part of this, of what this project consists of, what Riquezas del Campo is all about, is volunteers. So the Pioneer Valley Workers Center has a pipeline of volunteers who are able to participate in this project. Without them, this project could not have advanced the way it has. In the future, given that we feel an obligation to not always rely on volunteers, even though in this moment, starting out, we don't have the capacity to work because all of the members at the co-op farm have their own full-time jobs for paid work outside of being members, worker owners at the farm. So, Riquezas del Campo is currently something that is we're still in the early phases of developing our system to become a efficient farm. As you may already know, a lot of the farmers in this area earn minimum wage, work minimum wage jobs. And a lot of folks who are field workers who work in the agriculture space have long working days and they have to work all the time to be able to live in this country. So the opportunity Campo offers is to offer a platform for a business that can really change the life of a person, that allows you to see beyond the current set of options, to see new options, new ways of working besides working for a boss on minimum wage. So the process for creating this farm has really included many challenges. We've been constantly needing to adapt, to seek alternatives. In our second year, we actually were able to legally establish the farm as an LLC, which is a cooperative led by immigrants in its majority. And that gave us the opportunity to be able to apply and earn a state grant, which allowed us to leap to be able to buy more infrastructure and seasonal infrastructure, equipment, things that allowed us to carry out our farm work more efficiently. So this state grant allowed us to houses of a medium size, purchase a tractor, other farm equipment, and that was a little bit challenging, just to say it that way. Since it was a state grant, the state expected certain things. They have certain requirements that you have to meet with. So those specific requirements, it ended up, one of the hardest ones was that we had to keep working on things during the pandemic, during COVID, even though we had a year of time for the grant period, they ended up shortening it to 6 months. So we had to find a way to have somebody working on this at almost at full time to be able to pull it off. So I think that that's a good brief introduction to our farm, Riquezas del Campo.
Thank you very much, Jose. And I just want to open it up to any questions you have directly about Jose's experience, the Riquezas process. They need to be able to hear you too, so.
All right, let me wake up. Good morning. My name is Fallon Davis. I'm from Newark, New Jersey. Thank you for letting us know about your co-op. What I'm tries to understand is the exact process to make yourself legally a co-op. So you become an LLC and you, is there like a line item when you, like you select co-op? How do you become a co-op?
I could about that process, and then you, Jose, could speak specifically to your part. So,
So to form a co-op, you can choose multiple legal entities, right? LLCs are especially useful for immigrant co-ops. So you can be a worker owner with any foreign person can be an owner of a business, right? And take ownership draws and use an ITIN number, right? So an LLC is especially useful for that. LLC, partnership LLC, taxed as a partnership. So that's what Riquezas chose. There are multiple other statutes you can use for cooperatives, right? C corporations. A lot of states have cooperative corporation statutes. The one in Massachusetts, the Employee Cooperative Corporation Statute 157A is a good one to use if you are clear you want to do a worker cooperative and get taxed like a worker cooperative, things like that. But plenty of people use C corporations, B corps, LLCs, limited cooperative associations. So the main process we suggest is that you answer some basic questions, right? What are your members how are your members gonna engage with a cooperative? Do you have people of mixed status or people internationally that need to use ITINs instead of social security numbers? How do you want to be taxed? Are you okay having a board of directors with a president? If not, an LLC allows for you to have a fully horizontal structure. Corporations require a board of directors. Do you need to have cooperative in your name? That's another thing. Some cooperative statutes require that you use the cooperative statute to have cooperative in your name without setting up a per state, state by state. So answer some of these questions. How do you want to work? And then connect with us and we'll help you find a lawyer that gets co-ops and can help you decide this is the right statute for you. Because there's a lot of lawyers that are just going to say LLC, that's what we know, take that, use it. C Corp, that's what we know. But there's a growing community of lawyers that get co-ops, right? And can help you specifically walk through a lot of these questions. So first, ideally, is like work through these questions, find someone who knows co-ops, a co-op support organization, like for them, Pioneer Valley Worker Center, right? For you, it might be another local organization. We have a national organization that can help work through those membership and tax questions initially, and then meet with a lawyer and maybe a CPA to just like choose your entity. Yeah. Jose, do you want to add anything about that process of choosing the legal entity?
yes. So in our case, we chose an LLC because Riquezas del Campo is a majority led by field workers, and we decided that LLC would open the door to that whoever, no matter what their immigration status was, could still be an owner, a worker owner of this LLC, of this business. As our colleague Matt was just sharing, that was an important consideration for us. If we had picked the corporation method, that requires that you have to have a social security number for the owners or the members. So that would be a barrier for many, for one of our main goals for our farm, which is to specifically open opportunities for immigrants, for them to be worker owners of their own business. So that was one of the main considerations. A huge advantage that an LLC has.
How many people are the principal co-op owners in this?
¿Cuánta gente hay como dueños en ese negocio? José.
Sí, actualmente somos 5 socios dueños.
People often ask, what is a good number to start a co-op? And it ranges, right? Usually 3 is kind of your baseline, 3 unrelated people. But a good core group, we've seen 3 to 15, right? There's some sort of ideal thing between 7 and 12, maybe 5 and 12, right? A good enough team to cover the bases you need for all the things to start your co-op, but not so many that tasks are so distributed or it's unclear roles and things like that for your founding group. You can have other layers of supporters and things too, but yeah.
But just a follow-up question, how did you build the support and, I'm sorry, how did you build the trust and the relationships in that 5-person group to be able to work together and discuss?
¿Escuchaste la pregunta, José?
Se escucha muy baja la
Oh,
interpretación.
ok. La pregunta fue de cómo hicieron las relaciones necesarias para hacer su grupo, cómo fue la formación en eso.
Bueno,
Well,
bueno, Riquezas del Campo,
Riquezas del Campo,
yo diría que
I would say that
es un proyecto
it's a project from an organization
de esta área que se llama
in this area that is called Pioneer Work and Friday Center. We usually abbreviate it with the Workers Center. This is a center that dedicates to fight for people's rights, and a lot of their memberships are from workers del campo.
Entonces, en una ocasión o un día,
In one occasion or one day,
al Centro Obrero,
the center or the city of Northampton and Land Trust were offered some lands that were being used, and they talked to their membership to see who was interested in those lands and if there was people that wanted to use them. And Riquezas del Campo basically it was born because of some members or 3 families, big families, and had the necessity to sow their vegetables in a healthy way, in the way that they did it in their original place. And the way that we connected the people were through a bigger organization, and they usually fight for immigrants' rights and and people in general. How did they have the land? What was the process to own these lands?
José, ¿escuchaste? Es un poco, yo sé que el audio es un poco difícil. ¿Cómo obtuvieron la tierra? ¿Cómo consiguieron la tierra?
Sí, como les comentaba,
Yes, like I was mentioning,
en el proceso de las
in
tierras
the process of the lands,
tuvo mucho que ver el Centro Obrero.
the Center Obrero had a lot to do with this because the Antros and the city of Northampton,
La manera en que
the way that they borrowed the lands, they needed
el Centro
somebody
Obrero
to let them
es un
borrow
creador
it.
que tenemos.
And
Las tierras están
this is somebody that we had, and these lands have a contract
del campo,
with Riquezas del Campo, but in reality, the organization that has these lands is the Centro Obrero.
nosotros estamos
So we are
Bienvenidos los niños.
Sí, nosotros estamos subarrendando la
So
tierra,
we are,
ya que es la manera en que se hizo un contrato
we have a
contrato legal
contract, a legal
donde el centro
contract,
obrero
where the
fungía
center of
como
Obreros,
fiador de las tierras, como
uh,
arrendador, y nosotros las
they were
subarrendamos,
helping us with
pero
these
en
lands.
realidad
But in
las tierras
reality,
son
the
derechos
lands
cooperativos
are from Riquezas del
a largo
Campo
plazo,
at
todo
the end of
es
the
por
day,
parte de
at
Centros.
least from the interest on behalf.
Any other questions or things to add from this experience?
So you were saying they have a land trust. That's where they have the land from, but it's not.
They have an arrangement with a land trust?
They don't own the land.
Right.
If we have just adopt a lot of things more, and the problem with that, they can just take the land, so we're trying to just get out of that. Farmers, that process. We're trying to build in New Jersey. Especially in New York. That's just for.
Anyone else working on land trust issues here that want to chime in? Or share a little bit more, Jose, about your experience working with that land trust?
Perdón, no se está escuchando bien. Sí, ok. Pues el subarrendamiento o el arrendamiento original que se tiene con las
The original process that we have with land trust is a long-term,
99 años,
I don't know if it's like 99 years, something like that.
Con la otra parte de la ciudad vecina,
But and the other part
pero
with the next cities,
automáticamente
we have to
por la cuestión
renovate.
de los pequeños plazos, ¿verdad?
We have to renovate
Esa es
these
la principal razón por la
with the
que
short
toda la
term.
infraestructura
That's why the infrastructure, and
se le considera temporal
that's
o
why we
mobile.
consider this
Todo
temporary or
eso
mobile. We can
ha
move it.
podido
We can move it. All the
moverlo
infrastructure that we have constructed, we can
fácilmente,
move it to another place
pero
easily.
está construida la
But
mayoría
it has been
federal
constructed in the part of the
a
land
largo
trust
plazo.
that is for a long
Y
term,
directamente
and directly
los que
the ones that are
trabajan
representing
con ellos es el centro obrero,
the ones that are represented with them is the Centro of
pero
Obreros,
ellos
but they
en cada caso
are,
están en todas
in
las
our case, they are in
disposiciones
all the
para ser
dispositions so
usadas
that those lands can be used.
cultivadas, ¿no?
And
No les
and
gusta mucho
so
la idea de que sean
they don't really like the
sino
idea
que solamente
that those lands
esté
are not
solo
being used,
hierba
or
para vaca
just the
o
fact
paja.
that there's only grass growing there.
No tenemos una
Also, we don't
mala experiencia
have,
todavía con
we
ellos.
haven't had a bad experience with them yet,
Sí,
although
tenemos que seguir
we have to continue.
pues muchas prácticas
We have to continue a lot of practices, if we can say it like that, like to take care of
donde hay naturaleza,
the
tanto de animales como
natural of the animals, the
tenemos que hacer
trees,
prácticas
things that we have to continue practicing,
orgánicas, ¿no?
organic
Siempre cuidando la
practices,
naturaleza
always taking
y
care of nature,
nuestro
Mother Nature and the animals.
medio ambiente.
Gracias, José.
Thank you,
No sé si
Jose.
Audi quiere agregar algo.
If somebody wants to add anything.
Okay, vamos a tener, we're going to have another time to do discussion. But first we'd like to hear from Thidi, who has been a longtime organizer here in Worcester with the African community, with co-ops through Worcester Roots, and many other projects, the Healing Garden Institute. So we're going to pull up your slide here, Thidi, and point this camera at you wherever you'd like to stand.
Hi, good morning. Hi, my name is Thidi Tshiguvho, and I'm with Worcester Roots. I'm the director. I used to be a board member for a while, and recently I transitioned. So, different roles. So I'm looking forward to, participating, doing my part in the movement as a director. I'm also the founder of Healing Garden Institute, which is one of the fiscally sponsored project of Worcester Roots, and it focuses on healing through nature, through food gardens and landscape design. But for today, we'll be wearing more a Worcester Roots hat. And yeah, so for those who don't know Worcester Roots, we always like to assume that everybody knows us. I see some familiar faces, but it's a collective of young and not so young organizers in the Worcester Main South. And our mission is to create opportunities for social, economic, and environmental justice. And our goal really is to help sprout and sustain as many co-ops, worker co-ops in this case, as possible. And we do that through co-op incubation and also participating in different ways to the solidarity economy movement and other activities. So one of the main ways we do this is to support the development or formation of worker co-ops through the Co-op Academy training, which we hold once a year, hopefully more in the future. But this is 6-week long training on building and maintaining co-ops, which, as we understand, most of the co-ops find it challenging due to, different factors, and most of the startups don't succeed. So we try our best to support them, whether, they are at the idea stage or they are already operating businesses, family businesses or not. We invite experienced trainers. We do this collaboratively. We don't have all the expertise internally. So the experienced trainers will offer, typical co-op one-on-one topics, from how members can organize themselves. Most of the things that Jose was sharing, who do you bring in, what kind of expertise that they'll be contributing, is this family co-op, what are the values? Because as you can imagine, some of the co-ops really operate from different values, especially indigenous communities, BIPOC communities. There are different values which we encourage, such as relationship to the land, obligation to the community, and so on. So they go through thinking about what their values are, what's their mission, strategic planning, and decision making. How are they gonna handle conflict resolution? Those important things that can make or break a co-op. They also learn about legal aspects in cooperating, for example. We have experts and volunteer lawyers that can take them through the process. And they also learn about products and markets, because sometimes people have ideas based on passion, but it's still important to do your market analysis and determine the really feasibility of the business, and the financials, which are usually for most people the difficult aspects of business, accounting, all those things. So they go through that. And upon graduation, there's one-on-one coaching, continuing with a successful entrepreneur. This could be experts from the field, or this could be former participants who receive extra training to serve in that purpose. And they continue to have access to peer support. You know, we try to connect them to similar co-ops in the ecosystem, so that, you know, they can learn from each other and share resources as well. And of course, legal assistance with incorporation. So, and then we continue with some, you know, not just forming co-ops, with other, you know, green or cooperatively run initiatives. We support them through fiscal sponsorship, for example, you know, so that, you know, they can get encouraged to form co-ops in the future if that's what they choose to do. And we also provide space sharing, access to networking, fundraising, you know, how to apply for grants and things like that. So that's how we support co-ops through the Co-op Academy. But we are also very much dedicated to empowering youth to participate in the movement, build their own co-ops. And, you know, since I think 2015, we have been able to incubate at least 4 successful youth co-ops. Perhaps some of the names you recognize here: the Toxic Soil Busters, the Youth in Charge, Future Focus Media, and Worcester Youth Cooperatives, who worked in different areas, from providing locally produced food to lead safety, to landscaping, to video productions, and so on. So we, you know, we truly believe that if the solidarity movement is going to be successful, we really need to invest in young people. And lastly, you know, we participate a lot in community organizing and movement building. We form collaborations, coalitions, networking with local, city level, and state and regional and national collaborations. So in short, this is what we do, and we are hoping that in the future, you know, Worcester has a lot of communities that, you know, BIPOC communities, another marginalized group, who really are either, you know, running co-ops without knowing or being part of the movement at this point. So we are hoping that we can bring those into the picture. There's a lot, for example, of African communities here who are, wherever they come from, they were doing business there, and there's a lot of values. For example, in South Africa, that's where I come from, that I see can be beneficial to the you know, organic farming and the movement. So we hope that we'll be able to bring that and contribute to food systems. So that's what, in short, what Worcester Roots does. And yeah, we'd be happy for you guys to visit our website and see how we can work together, or you can contribute. You know, a lot of expertise. We depend on volunteership to run our programs.
Then we'll have discussion and questions for Thidi in 1 second. I just want to share a little bit of some statewide things that are happening. In Massachusetts, there's a coalition for worker ownership and power that has been going for a few years, that is mostly organizing around legislative advocacy work, right? We've been able to ensure that the Massachusetts Center for Employee Ownership becomes a permanent entity again. So we rejuvenated that Mass Center for Employee Ownership. We're working to increase training funds and things like that. But it's a great, advocacy coalition where worker co-ops are involved with support organizations and labor is present and things like that. So it's a great place to plug in if you're interested in finding out, if you're in Massachusetts at least. And then nationally, we have a federation of worker cooperatives, and we exist to support, I'm a staff person there, and we exist to support worker co-ops getting going and existing cooperatives. So we have a co-op clinic that is a network of people who have started co-ops, who are in co-ops, who have been part of cooperatives, and are now experts in helping around those questions of governance and onboarding and how do you set up your finances in a cooperative? How do you deal with profit sharing and all of those questions, right? So if you are in a place where you're ready for some technical assistance, for some support, you can feel free to reach out at usworker.coop to the co-op clinic, and we can connect you with folks. And you can join as a member, even as a startup, and get access to a lot of educational resources through the US Federation. And if you're in a rural area, USDA designated rural area, we have funds to cover that technical assistance. And a lot of other support organizations in the region may have access to this as well. Cooperative Development Institute, for example, and several others. So that's just a little bit about the landscape, but really we wanted to discuss, like, at this point, where do people need more information? Like where, what are other models people have seen work well? Riquezas was connected with that worker center. Worcester Roots has partnered with community-based organizations and individuals with kind of mission-led, co-op ideas. Where do you want to? We're open to wherever you want to take this conversation. And the folks on Zoom should feel free to chime in as well. Feel free to raise your hand or just come off mute and chime in this discussion. Do we start with networking and then do profit sharing? Okay, start with profit. So co-ops are set up in a unique way for any surplus that's generated by the members. It's called surplus. Profit is technically the stuff that's generated by non-members, right? Any surplus that's generated by members in a good year can be reinvested in the co-op without being taxed twice, right? So you're not taxed at the corporate level, then the individual level. You can do it where you only get taxed one time, either at the corporate level if you're reinvesting it in the co-op, or if you're deciding to allocate it to the people who made that profit possible. You can do that in a couple different ways. You can just pay it out as like a bonus at the end of the year and person pays individual tax. Or you can set up what's called individual capital accounts or internal capital accounts, right? And those capital accounts, tell me interpreters if I need to slow down with this technical language. Yeah. So these internal capital accounts are calculated based on patronage. In a worker co-op, that's how many hours you've worked throughout the year usually. Right? So if someone's working 40 hours and someone's working 20 hours and you've decided to allocate $10,000 worth of your surplus, the person who worked 40 hours generally gets twice as much. Whatever percentage you say goes to the collective or to the individual, the person who worked more generally gets more. There's other ways to do it, but that's the most common. And so then you choose how much gets paid out at the end of the year to the person. It has to be at least 20% so they can pay the taxes on it. But up to 80% can be put in this account, which is just a spreadsheet saying it's an IOU, right? We owe you this, but the co-op can reuse it to grow, right? It looks good on the balance sheet, right? These internal capital accounts allow this growth mechanism in a co-op. And then when the person leaves or the co-op is able to pay that out, that's when those capital accounts are paid out to the individuals. So that's generally how profit sharing works. There are other ways of doing it. Some co-ops, especially partnership LLCs, just decide this is when we do the ownership draws and we are calculating how much we're working and this is a fair way to do it. And we can help you connect with groups that can help set up that system if you're interested. But if you're doing it as a cooperative, subchapter T in the IRS, taxed as a cooperative, that's generally how you do it to avoid that double taxation with the internal capital accounts. So that's the profit sharing.
Can you say a little bit about how we used to network our co-ops in our?
Yeah, so one of the co-op principles is cooperation among cooperatives, right? Principle 6, it's a key one. That can look like a lot of different things in different places, right? That could be supply chain work, right? Especially in the food industry, there's a lot of opportunity for that, right? Growers connecting with cooperative retailers, right? That happens all over the place. Maybe even if it's a consumer cooperative, there is a lot of potential connection there. And then regionally, as I mentioned with co-op and elsewhere, there is a lot of co-ops supporting co-ops, right? So we're happy to help you connect into this world of co-ops, and people are happy to share their business plans often, their contacts and things like that. So their structures, their internal structures, if you want to start it up, you don't have to start from scratch. There's a lot out there in terms of networking with other co-ops. In Maine, if you're in Maine, there's a Principle 6, P6 conference that happens each year. There's a growing group in Connecticut that we could connect you to. Where else? Rhode Island, there's a good set of support organizations, Fuerza Laboral and others that are starting cooperatives in Rhode Island. Vermont has a robust co-op ecosystem with a chapter of our federation and an employee ownership center up there. So we're happy to connect you into this co-op ecosystem, and especially if you're in central Massachusetts, you should definitely connect with TD.
Yeah. So far we do it, depending on what co-op it is. But I was pleasantly surprised in South Africa, where I went to visit recently. The government at least has it's legally mandated to have like a database or a website where co-ops go and find, other co-ops they can network with, whether it's retailers and production. So hopefully we can explore such in the future. But yeah.
I'll just throw it out there since y'all are co-op interested. There is land, 40 acres in Grafton, that some of it is already being used through a land trust, and there's 2 farmers that are already there. If I look closer, I still might join. But anyway, I'm just giving the details now of a farmer friend, Potterfield Farm. There's some both individually land, but yeah, there's a lot of land that's not being used, and they're both on the board of the land trust. I'm sure you could detail. So sometimes I think it's a way to use sand and seed, especially because there's embedded in our relationships. Landowners in particular use the knowledge initially. So yeah, just something to think about if you're inspiring your current partner. Yep, lots of land out there.
Spread the word.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yep.
Information on of all the co-ops, how many of them or what percentage of them are run within immigrant communities versus maybe how many not so much. The ones that I know of are outside of
I don't know in New England. I know nationally it's close to 40%. There's a high concentration in New York City, the Bay Area. I don't know any specifics stats for New England around that, but there are quite a few, and there's a growing interest and movement around that. Immigrant worker centers are engaged in this work for sure, at like the Pioneer Valleys Worker Center and others. But yeah, do you have a sense in Central North?
Well, I know that in terms of aspiring, a lot of immigrants, like in Worcester, you know, the Ghanaian and Kenyan population, it's we call it almost a village now, and there's a lot of market for cultural foods and things like that. So, and for most of them, the main challenge is land. You know, because, you know, I'm glad to hear that there are some possibilities, but when you're an immigrant, it's just one of those things where you think, you know, it's not possible, but hopefully we'll be able to connect more and more people to available land. Yeah.
Maggie or
It's a
Jose
growing
want to
movement.
chime in on this question? Anyone else?
I couldn't actually hear the question. So if
How many of the co-ops in New England, worker co-ops in New England are in immigrant communities? Was the
oh golly, I don't have that statistic, but my guess would be, I would hesitate to make a guess. I mean, I think they're increasingly co-ops in immigrant communities and certainly also in BIPOC communities. Do you have any idea, Matt?
No, don't have the stats on that. Maggie is with the Cooperative Fund of New England. If you are interested in financing conversion of a farm into a cooperative or starting one, CFNE has a lot of great support, technical assistance, and really flexible lending. So it's great to work with a lender that gets co-ops, right? If you go to a bank, they're going to ask you for personal guarantees, credit scores, all sorts of things that CFNE and other co-op friendly lenders may not. So if you have any questions.
I would also add that for anyone who's here from New York State, we lend in New York State as well. We changed our name in January, a year ago. Oh my gosh, to the Cooperative Fund of the Northeast, and we have a loan officer and a technical assistance officer in New York State now too.
Upstate New York as well. Yeah, the audio here is challenging.
New Jersey as well.
Not New Jersey, right, Maggie?
No, not New Jersey, not Pennsylvania, although we're not prohibited from lending outside of the Northeast. We just, the bulk of our loans need to be.
Another lender for New Jersey would be Shared Capital Cooperative. They're very co-op friendly, a cooperative themselves as well. Local Enterprise Assistance Fund, LEAF, and then the ICA group has a fund for jobs worth owning, I believe it's called. There's others for larger financing. Yeah.
How far upstate and west are you looking at in regards to funding and lending?
How far upstate and west do you lend in New York?
All the way up to the border, and our loan officer is in Ithaca, so pretty far. I think we have a loan in Buffalo, so we will pretty much cover north of New York City. Anywhere in New York State.
Yeah, whole upstate pretty much. Other questions or resources people want to share around this?
Matt, if you want to give people my email address, if anybody wants more information, they can contact me after.
Yeah, I'm happy to share.
Thanks.
Yeah.
What does the process look like of turning an existing farm into a co-op?
Yeah, we could do a whole hour and a half on that, but I can. So the first phase usually is getting gauging the interest from your team members, right? let's say there's one or two owners and you're interested in potentially broadening that ownership to become a cooperative. The first step is gauging the interest from the workers, right? Or there's other ways too. You could build out a new team that would eventually be owners, but generally you want to gauge some interest, and then you want to gauge the financial viability of multiple owners and things like that. So a feasibility study is usually a good early stage thing as well. And there's a whole network of support organizations for that transition. Workers to Owners Collaborative is the national support group, but there's lots of groups in New England that focus on that. Cooperative Development Institute, like I mentioned, is one. We have advisors that are specialized in it too. So you would start thinking, okay, financially, does this make sense? Team-wise, does this make sense? And you do the explore phase, right? We're happy to come and do a workshop with you, with your, your farm workers or whoever, and you get that kind of assessment, right? And then you want to think on the owner's time scale, what makes sense? Do you have, a certain time frame you want to be at? Like, are you exiting? Are you just growing the ownership and setting up some of those systems? Are there tax incentives that are key for you to think about? Because there are tax, with the conversion, you can keep the culture that you've created in your farm business. You can get some tax benefits, right? Roll over the tax implications of the sale of the farm to a cooperative entity. And then so you start like getting the technical components together, right? What would your agreements be? What are membership criteria? Those kind of things like we mentioned earlier. And then start kind of putting together the deal. How much of the financing would need to come from an outside lender like CFNE? How much would be owner financed? How much would be investment from the new members, if that's at the time of sale or over time, right? And so you put together that deal. You may want to work with a technical assistance provider to find the right, arrangement there, and get a CPA involved probably to figure out some of the tax implications of that whole deal. And then when it comes time to do the sale, it's not so different from, just like a closing on a house where there's an actual, sale that happens. But then there's all the support of setting up the systems and culture of cooperative governance afterwards, too, that you want to make sure you dedicate a lot of time. And that process, is anywhere between 3 months and 2-3 years, right? We've seen the most successful ones be around a 2-year process, right? Where there's intention around a lot of the steps, but it can happen faster depending. That's a general overview. We have lots of tools and things I'm happy to share with anyone who's interested in that conversion process. And we have recorded webinars specifically on that process too, so I'm happy to connect you. I don't know if anyone wants to add anything or follow up. I also want to mention that Global Village is running an intensive, what we do like a retreat style intensive in May or June, where you can like build your business plan. And this is specifically for land-based BIPOC-led groups. You can build out your business plan or generate that feasibility study or whatever component will kind of specialize it to you, and you can be there on the land and build that team. And then we do a cohort program in the fall that is good for people converting or starting a cooperative land-based business or other type of land-based businesses too, not just in the co-op arena. If you're not sure, if you're more in the nonprofit, you're welcome to participate in that cohort program too. But we go through a lot of the business planning tools, through an online course open to anyone in the region.
The difference between being an employee-owned or worker and a co-op. I hear that a lot. Is that technically a co-op or?
Yeah. So if we're talking about co-ops in general, we often talk about people working together, right? Worker cooperatives, the people who individuals who work at the business are the worker owners. And then there's consumer cooperatives. You might be familiar with retail, food, groceries. Those are often consumer owned, right? Or REI, or a lot of those are consumer owned cooperatives. And then there's producer cooperatives, also common in the agricultural sector, People come together to market ocean spray, Cabot cheese. And then there's multi-stakeholder where you mix some of those, right? Maybe there's a grocery that is worker and consumer owned and they share board seats. But when we talk about employee ownership, worker ownership has two components, right? The ownership component where you share in the risk and reward, and then the governance component where you're making decisions together, right? Worker cooperatives have both of those, right? You have the worker ownership and the governance component and the democratic decision making. ESOPs, employee ownership more broadly, employee stock ownership plans have that first component, right? The worker ownership component, but they may not have the governance, the collective decision or cooperative decision making that a worker co-op has. And similarly, nonprofits can be democratic workplaces. They can have that democratic decision making. They can be a worker self-directed nonprofit or just a democratic nonprofit like Worcester Roots strives to be, but they don't have the collective ownership. You don't have, you know, a buy-in and profit sharing, and you know, a nonprofit is technically, you know, a public kind of entity. So, but any of those are in our conglomeration. We have members of all of those in the U.S. Federation, for example, and a lot of, you know, collaboration. But does that answer? Yeah. Any other?
More questions, more experience sharing?
The Federation as the worker co-ops is offering support in organizational things. Concur with that it takes a lot of time and attention to have the result that you want. That has been extremely helpful in this. And if you haven't heard of Ujama, it's a new seed company and a new worker co-op of BIPOC farmers that has amazing online now education tools, and I think, you know, can get support for them.
Yeah. Yeah, it was just a comment that that the U.S. Federation of Worker Co-op has been very supportive of Ujama Cooperative Farming Alliance. That is a BIPOC seed and producer-led cooperative. Does that?
That's basically
and I just want to encourage you to talk to Ira about, you know, Ujama, and there's another workshop at the afternoon session about Ujama with two presenters from Ujama as well. They're here as well. And also Southern Exposure Seed Exchange that Ira is involved in. You'll hear about it in the keynote, but this is a great example of long-term, you know, farm-based worker cooperative in action, has figured it out for many, many years. So thank you for the leadership on that. Ujamafarms.org and ujamaseeds.com.
Yeah.
And if you Google Ujama with 2 A's at the end, Cooperative Farming Alliance, there's a lot of great stuff on there. And again, Bonita, Adib, and Nate Kleinman are here to do a workshop on that. I just wanted to mention that there are great online resources for co-ops. And we also have a peer network of worker co-op farms around the country. So if when you're ready and you're ready to do it, we'll connect you. Listserv, regular meetings, connect with their Rocksteady Farm in upstate New York it's a clear-led farm that has a lot of great co-op specific resources on their website. And then if you anything for legal stuff around co-ops, Sustainable Economies Law Center is great. Democracy at Work Institute has a whole resource library that's very useful and has a whole Spanish language section as well. And then on our website, we've built out mini guides it's hard to navigate all these resources sometimes, but you can go there and find one specifically on onboarding new team members, or on the co-op structure and decision-making, or getting funding for technical assistance, etc. So check that out at US Federation. And then WorcesterRoots.org, there's a lot of good resources for Central Mass and in general there as well. Thank you all for participating and your patience with our technology in the beginning.
Oh, y'all did great. That was a great smooth,